Hi, and welcome to 1.1 What is Business? This topic might not be the most fun one, but it has a lot of very important information, and everything you learn further depends on this topic. So, in this class, we're going to talk about three things: the nature of business, economic sectors, and startups. That's it, three things, which leads us to three main objectives, which are to describe the nature of business, to explain the four economic sectors, and to explain challenges and opportunities for starting up a business. Your teacher should know what AO1, AO2 means. This is assessment objective 1, assessment objective 2. If your teacher doesn't know what that is, then you'd better ask him or her to figure that out. So the first part of this class is nature of business, and the objective is describe the nature of business, which is AO1. So this is pretty simple. What is business? Business is an organization that provides goods and services satisfying the needs and wants in a profitable or non-profitable way. Yes, that is correct. If a business is non-profitable, it is still a business. And in the updated syllabus of the IB Business Management, a very big emphasis is put on social enterprises and non-profit businesses. So this is really important, and if it's non-profit, it is still a business. So when it comes to businesses, the first thing that we've got to understand is how they work. How they work is explained with the so-called input-output model. Look at the picture that I drew myself, by the way. So we can see the three major steps: inputs, processes, and outputs. Inputs refer to what is called in economics factors of production. There are four factors of production: land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship. Another way to call these factors of production is physical resources, human resources, financial resources, and entrepreneurship. Land or physical resources is not just land. It can also refer to real estate or raw materials or fish or gold or wood or anything you can extract from earth. Labor or human resources refers to people in business, employees and managers. Capital or financial resources is cash and other forms of financial resources, as well as capital goods, for example, things or equipment that you use in production. Office chairs, desks, laptops, or assembly line robots all would refer to capital or financial resources. And the last factor of production, or the last input, is entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship is wisdom or a skill set that allows people to take risk and combine all factors of production to add value and produce outputs, products, services, or goods that we'll talk about later. We have four inputs, right? Land, labor, land, and capital, or financial, physical, human resources, and entrepreneurship. What we do with these inputs is we do certain processes, or we add value to these inputs. If you just take an input and give it to someone else, this is not business. You need to do something. You need to transform these inputs into finished goods or services. So there are two ways of adding value. The first one is manufacturing or production of goods, which are tangible. The second way is provision of services, which are intangible. With regards to production of goods, there are two ways how production can work. It can be capital intensive or labor intensive. If it's capital intensive, it means that it relies on machinery. If it is labor intensive, then it means that it relies on labor. A typical example of capital intensive business would be car manufacturing. It's mainly done by robots. A typical example of labor intensive business would be this: farming or textile industries. All of them heavily rely on labor. Finally, the last stage of input-output model is outputs. Output is a product that can either be a good, tangible, or service, intangible. Once again, product is either a good or a service. Very often students say product and they mean good by that, okay? No, product can be either a good or a service. So, goods are products, but not all products are goods. Services can also be a product. Also, products can be categorized based on who they are sold to. If one product is sold to by one business to another business, this relationship is called B2B or business to business. For example, if your school is buying desks from a furniture manufacturer, then this is a B2B producer good, okay? But if your parents buy a desk from the same furniture manufacturer, but they use this desk and put it in your bedroom so that you use it to study, that would be a B2C relationship, business to consumer relationship. And this desk will be consumer good, not producer good. So all goods and services can be either producer goods and services, B2B, or consumer goods and services, B2C. So that is pretty much it about how businesses work. Input-outputs model. We have inputs, processes, added value, and outputs. If you have any questions about that or something is unclear, please leave a comment below so that I can respond to that. The next essential thing with regards to businesses is business functions. First, before introducing what business functions are, I usually ask my students these questions. How are businesses organized functionally? How are functions organized in small and large businesses? What's the difference between function and department? And is it important for departments to cooperate? You might want to pause this video for a while and think about these questions, and then we'll see how right you were. So feel free to do that if you want. If not, then let's see. So all businesses, regardless of their size, location, and other characteristics, have the same 4 business functions: human resource management, or HRM, finance and accounts, marketing, and operations management. What do these functions actually mean? So HR, or HR management, refers to making sure that right people are employed and paid by the business, regularly trained, appraised, and treated in accordance with health and safety regulations. Finance and accounts are responsible for planning for the future costs, revenues, and cash flow, and keeping records of the costs, revenues, and cash flow in the past, as well as financial analysis and budgeting. Marketing refers to making sure the right product is sold at the right price, in the right place, using appropriate promotion methods. And operations management is making sure that goods are produced using relevant methods of production and/or making sure that the most efficient processes are used to provide services. Guys, at this point it's completely okay if you don't entirely understand what these business functions are. The way business is taught in high schools is actually divided into 5 units. The first one is introduction and business environment, and the remaining 4 units correspond to 4 business functions. So it's going to take us about 2 years to figure out what they actually are, but for starters, what I've just told you is enough. You more or less understand what business functions are. What's important is that these 4 functions never go away, and they are the same in small or large businesses. Okay, regardless of where you are, regardless of how large or small your business is. If you are a multinational company, then you're very much likely to divide these functions into functional departments, and there will be a department that is responsible for this or that function or part of the function. If you are a sole trader, if you run your business alone, then it's just you, one person. However, 4 functions do not go away. So businesses can have 4 departments or more than 4 departments, but businesses only have 4 functions, regardless of their size. Which business function do you think is the most important? This is a tricky question. Very often people think that HR is the most important function because it's about relationships, it's about people. If there are no people, there's no business. However, from the long-term perspective, none of the functions should be more or less important. All of them should be equally important, and all of them should work towards the same goal. So this thing that you can see on the left, when one function is telling others what to do, this is no good, because these 4 functional departments in the company will work independently and the common goal will not be achieved. However, on the right we can see interdependence. This is when 4 business functions are working together towards the same goal, and they are equally important. So interdependence, when one function relies on the other 3 and it applies to all business functions, this is cool. When there's no interdependence, this is not cool. That is pretty much it about how businesses work, how they are organized functionally. The 2 most important things here were input-output model and business functions. Now the second part of this class, economic sectors, and the objective here is explain the economic sectors: primary, secondary, tertiary, and quaternary. First of all, what is an economic sector? Let me just read the definition from my website. Economic sector refers to all the businesses within an economy that are involved in a similar activity. Yeah, pretty good. So, we take all the businesses in an economy, for example, in a country, and categorize them into 4 groups based on what they do. So, these categories, these 4 sectors, refer to the nature of activity, refer to what businesses actually do. All right, let's see what these sectors are. Primary sector refers to all the businesses that extract raw materials. Mining, fishing, forestry, agriculture, oil extraction should be some examples of primary sector activities. Secondary sector businesses transform raw materials extracted by primary sector businesses into goods, which means that secondary sector refers to manufacturing. Tertiary sector refers to provision of services: banking, education, retail stores, cinemas, transportation, and etc. That would be tertiary sector activities. Quaternary sector is quite similar to tertiary because it also includes services, but exclusively those services that relate to data, knowledge, and IT, information technology. For example, video game development and app development would be an example of quaternary sector activities. However, selling these apps and video games in retail stores would be an example of tertiary sector activity because this is selling. All consumer goods go through all the sectors of economy, and this route that it takes for them to transform from raw materials into finished consumer goods on the shelves of the supermarkets, this route is called chain of production. So, for example, bread that you buy probably every day in your favorite bakery was once crops that were harvested by the primary sector businesses. Then these crops were transformed into flour and baked into bread by secondary sector businesses, which would be a bakery. And then this bread was delivered to the supermarkets where you can buy it, where you can take it from the shelf, which refers to tertiary sector business. Why do we actually need to know all these economic sectors, you might ask? My students do certainly ask me that. Well, you are a business management student. You are a potential entrepreneur in the future. So you can use this information for different reasons. You can make plenty of conclusions with that. One thing you might do is actually predict the future. History tells us that all the economies go through the same stages of development over time. This is called Clarke's sector model. A long time ago, most people were all in primary sector. They were just taking stuff from trees and collecting crops and eating them, and that's it. Then at some point they started transforming these goods and the importance of secondary sector was increasing. At some point the importance of secondary sector starts to decrease, and this period when the importance of secondary sector decreases is called deindustrialization. Tertiary sectors tend to increase over time. Why is that? Because the wealthier people get, the more they want to spend money on entertainment, on sending their kids to a better school, on travel, on going to the cinema, on opening a bank account. All of these things refer to services. So the wealthier people are, the more they are likely to spend money on services. Quaternary sector, the IT and data and knowledge, is gradually on the increase. By the way, in some literature you can see that quaternary sector is not the fourth sector of economy, it's like a subsector of tertiary. So there can be different opinions with regards to that. What we know for sure is this sector or subsector is now on the increase. Looking at this chart, you might also ask yourselves, how do we measure the importance of sectors? What does this employment refer to? So overall, there are 2 ways how you can measure the importance of different sectors of economy. One way is to count the number of people who are employed in this or that sector. For example, let's say you're a very tiny economy and you have 100 people and half of them are busy manufacturing smartphones, which means that the importance of secondary sector is 50% because half of all employed people are in the secondary sector, busy with manufacturing, with assembling smartphones. The second way to measure the importance of sectors is counting the GDP in this or that sector. From your economics course, you probably know that GDP refers to gross domestic product, and if half of all the value of economy's GDP comes from harvesting crops and agriculture, then it means that the importance, the value of primary sector is 50%. Or it can also be expressed in money. For example, if your country's GDP is $1 billion and 600 million come from agriculture, then the importance of agriculture, of primary sector, is 60%. Once you know how to measure the importance of different sectors, you can also draw other conclusion about what type of economy you are in, or what type of economy you want to start a business in. Overall, there are three types of economies. If primary sector dominates in the economy, then this is called low income or less developed economy. If secondary sector dominates, then it's called middle income or developing economy. And if tertiary and quaternary sectors dominate, this is called high income or developed economy. In less developed economies, the workforce is not usually very well educated and the quality of life and income levels are not very high. Economies where secondary sector dominates or developing economies are, for example, so-called BRICS countries: Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. Labor costs in these countries are relatively low, and these countries are a good destination to outsource manufacturing of goods. Countries where tertiary and quaternary sector dominate are referred to as developed economies. Income levels there are relatively high and people spend money on services. At the same time, labor costs in these economies are pretty high and it might be very expensive to manufacture goods in these economies. You might be interested in relative importance of economic sectors in different countries, and if you're interested in that, then you can check out this article on Wikipedia, which gives you a comparative table. So now you know pretty much everything you're supposed to know about sectors. The final part of this class is startups, and our objective here is explain challenges and opportunities for starting up a business. As you remember from the first part of this class, one of the 4 factors of production is entrepreneurship. It is an essential part of any business that refers to a skill set that allows to combine all factors of production and start an enterprise. People who have this skill set are called entrepreneurs. One of the most important characteristics of entrepreneurs is risk-taking. In addition to entrepreneurs, there are also intrapreneurs, people who are similar to entrepreneurs but work for a company. They are usually provided with a lot of freedom, they hire people for their teams themselves, they manage their time on their own, and they share pretty much the same opportunities and threats as entrepreneurs, but all of this is happening within a company context. Intrapreneurship is very common in Google, for example, and Gmail is a product of intrapreneurship. So, having said that, we're going to talk about opportunities and threats that startups, that new businesses face. Mainly, we'll talk about 3 things here: reasons to start a business, problems that are associated with starting a business, and the process of starting up a business. With regards to reasons to start a business, I created a top chart. I ask my students every year, what do you think are the reasons for starting up a business? And here's what they think, which is really accurate actually. On the left you can see what students say, and on the right you can see the fancy business management terminology. The main reason to start up a business is getting rich or financial rewards. Doing something new or innovation is the second one. Manage time on your own or life-work balance. Find something others don't do, filling in or identifying the market niche or gap. No boss or independence. Or I'm the boss, having a sense of responsibility. Or hobby, commercializing your personal interest. If you have any other reasons to start up a business, leave a comment below and I will update my chart. With regards to process of starting up a business, of course it's not universal for all the companies, however, most businesses go through the same steps. First, you've got to have a business idea, then you need to put this idea onto paper and write a business plan that we'll talk about in a moment. Then you need to choose a type of business identity that we'll talk about in 1.2. Then you need to seek finance, find money to run your business, and then you can just start trading. It doesn't have to be these steps only, and it doesn't have to be in this order. This is just like an average picture of what startups go through. With regards to business plan that I mentioned earlier, this is a document that outlines potential development of the business. Again, there is no one standard for business plan, and different businesses in different countries everywhere use different types of business plans. However, more or less, all business plans have these elements. Idea plus vision and mission, that we'll talk about later, plus goal, plus 4 business functions that you already know. So you need to basically explain what the business is about, what it's trying to achieve, and how you will make 4 business functions happen. In addition to that, business plans tend to include sustainability and corporate social responsibility. This is something that is really important, and this is something we'll talk about later, guys, in Unit 1, so stay tuned. Probably you heard about pitching. Pitch is a presentation of your business plan to potential investors or potential shareholders, and presentation skills here matter as much as the knowledge. So probably your business teacher will ask you guys to pitch some business ideas, and this is great fun. The final thing to talk about with regards to startups is challenges or problems that startups face. Again, I asked my students what they think the main challenges are, and here's the ranking. In brackets you can see what my students say written in fancy business management terminology. So first one, no money, limited finance, don't know how to run a business, lack of organization skills, nobody wants to work for me, recruitment issues, people don't work well, limited expertise, a lot of other similar businesses in the market, or really intense competition. This is what my students think. Again, it doesn't have to be the same. There can be more reasons or less reasons. They don't have to be in the same ranking, but this is pretty much what startups face. Now we can look back at objectives, and if you feel that you can describe the nature of business, explain the 4 economic sectors, and explain challenges and opportunities for starting up a business, then it means that you did a great job and you achieved all the objectives. Also, make sure you check out my website and see all the terms from this class, 1.1, What is Business? There are 40 terms, and if you feel you know all of them, then you did great. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in my next class. Bye-bye.